It's no secret that Kurt Cobain could be rather judgmental when it came to certain bands. Looking back on it now, it comes across as a little immature, but it makes total sense. In general, he tended to gravitate toward the fringe, embracing the oddities and imperfections of music instead of the glossy and accessible, though there were definitely exceptions to that. I'm sure if he were alive today, he would be a lot more open-minded and regret the way in which he'd openly downtalk some of these bands, but unfortunately, as he died in his mid-20s, that wasn't able to happen. Kurt obviously was not a perfect person. He still had a lot of growing up to do, and some of his comments you're about to hear in this video are proof of that, though he did legitimately make some valid points as well. So anyway, without further ado, let's dive into the bands Kurt Cobain hated or at the very least disliked. If you enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It would be greatly appreciated. So the first band that Kurt Cobain hated is Guns N' Roses. This one should be pretty obvious if you followed Nirvana for a good amount of time. At the 1992 VMAs, the band openly clowned Axl Rose. You can hear Dave repeatedly say, "Hi Axl," in a very sarcastic tone that probably had him seething with rage. In an interview I came across on loudersound.com, Kurt even admitted to spitting on Axl's piano. The entire day at the VMAs was full of tension between the bands. Apparently Duff McKagan wanted to fight Chris, and Kurt and Axl almost got into a fight too. Needless to say, Axl was Kurt's main issue with the band rather than their music, citing his misogyny as a huge reason as to why. Also, Axl's macho, tough guy persona was the antithesis of what Kurt Cobain stood for, and as a result, he simply wasn't a fan. Kurt's problem with Guns N' Roses, i.e. Axl Rose, is one that I completely understand. Axl wasn't very likable then and isn't very likable now. Back in the day, he had a massive ego and seemed genuinely insufferable, so I can't blame Kurt here. Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic have since reconciled with the guys from Guns N' Roses, and the feud is now a thing of the past. The next band Kurt hated is Pearl Jam. Unlike Guns N' Roses, Kurt's hatred for Pearl Jam was primarily based on their music. But Kurt was actually friends with the guys, so that's something cool.
Are you and Eddie better friends now? Have you always been friends?
We never had a fight ever. I've always hated their band.
But it's not like you're friends or anything.
No, well, I mean, I can consider him a person that I really like. I mean, we've had a few conversations on the phone. I really like him. I think he's a really nice person.
So this interview was recorded in late 1993, and by this point, Kurt had grown an appreciation for the band, but that doesn't nullify his previous comments about them. Here's a 1992 quote from Kurt talking about both Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains. "Those bands have been in the hairspray/cock rock scene for years, and all of a sudden they stop washing their hair and start wearing flannel shirts. It doesn't make any sense to me. There are bands moving from LA and all over to Seattle and then claim they've lived here all their life so they can get record deals. It really offends me." So Kurt's issues with Pearl Jam ran a bit deeper than simply disliking their music. He felt they were inauthentic and jumped on the grunge bandwagon once it started getting buzz. Whether this is true or not, I don't know, but it's honestly beside the point. I genuinely feel like Kurt's ego was speaking here. He more than likely viewed Pearl Jam as competition in the beginning, not to mention his punk rock roots went directly against what he thought Pearl Jam was. The truth is, I don't think the group deserved to be dismissed like that. I'm not really a Pearl Jam guy myself, admittedly, but they worked hard to get where they are. Kurt's issues with Pearl Jam were based on ego and a projection of his own insecurities. That's how I see it, at least. But it's good to see that by 1993, Kurt had grown a bit and realized the entire thing was unnecessary and kind of immature, and it's also good that Kurt and Eddie were friends. The next band Kurt wasn't very fond of is the Grateful Dead. According to an article from Far Out magazine, Kurt wasn't a fan of hippie culture in general, claiming they didn't really fight for what they believed in, rather they were very complacent and did a lot of psychedelics. Kurt, again being raised on punk rock, was much more forward in delivering his message. Kurt was even quoted as saying, "I wouldn't wear a tie-dyed t-shirt unless it was dyed with the urine of Phil Collins and the blood of Jerry Garcia." So yeah, it's safe to say he had complete and utter disdain for the Grateful Dead and likely most bands from the hippie era. At the beginning of the Nirvana song Territorial Pissings, Chris Novoselic poked fun at hippie culture by singing Get Together by Chet Powers. It's very tongue-in-cheek, not necessarily done in hatred, but it all but proves the band's feelings on the hippie movement. I was actually very surprised to learn this information, since Kurt was a known Beatles fan, but I guess the Grateful Dead and the Beatles were sonically in very different lanes. I really don't understand Kurt's disdain for them. I think he was just stuck in his punk rock attitude, which again, for being young and rebellious, it makes sense. These next two bands Kurt apparently disliked for the same reason: AC/DC and Led Zeppelin. Now, I wouldn't say he hated these bands, but he wasn't a fan of their lyrical content. Both bands were and are known for their at times sexist lyrics. For example, a lot of Led Zeppelin songs objectify women and talk about them in a purely sexual way. This was a hugely common thing back in the 70s. They were not the only band to do that, but still, Kurt wasn't comfortable with the meaning behind most of their songs. He's even quoted as saying, "I really did enjoy some of the melodies they'd written. It took me so many years to realize that a lot of it had to do with sexism. I was just starting to understand what was really pissing me off so much those last couple years of high school." So he liked the music of AC/DC and Led Zeppelin, just not their lyrics. Apparently Back in Black was the first song Kurt learned to play after getting a guitar at 14, while there's a track on the Incesticide compilation album called Arrow Zeppelin, which is a clear homage to the band in title at least. So I'd wager Kurt did have an affinity for both bands, but he also had issues. Looking back and reading some lyrics by both bands, I can see where Kurt was coming from here, but in that era, that type of music was very common. Different times, I guess. Bon Jovi is yet another band Kurt Cobain didn't really care for. There's really not a ton to discuss about this one. His opinion was short and sweet. He's quoted as saying,
Just because of the crap that's been written about us, that I don't even find myself like having very many opinions on bands anymore, or putting them down, or you know, going out of my way to have any kind of expression about them at all, because I don't know these people, you know. Bon Jovi could be one of the nicest people in the world. His music sucks, but you know, I don't even want to bother with even expressing those kind of opinions.
So that's really all it comes down to. Kurt thought Bon Jovi's music sucked, but acknowledged he might be a nice person. With this particular band, it doesn't seem like he hated them, but he left one comment in particular that some people tend to take very literally.
With someone for a cover of a magazine, and he was telling us the story of how Bon Jovi came in and said, he came in with a flannel shirt on, and he said, "Make me look like Nirvana." And he said, "Well,
That's pretty flattering.
if Bon Jovi wants to look like us, you know something's wrong."
And that just proves he's a desperate, untalented piece of shit.
Kurt was clearly joking here, but nonetheless, I'm not surprised at all that he did not like Bon Jovi. Bon Jovi was a band that tried to be bigger-than-life superstars, while Nirvana were the exact opposite of that. Fundamentally, two very different bands from very different worlds. To wrap things up, I have two honorable mentions: Alice in Chains and Stone Temple Pilots. I mentioned Alice in Chains earlier during the Pearl Jam section, and I guess at one point, Kurt didn't like them. He thought they, along with Pearl Jam, were corporate puppets and were trying to ride the new wave of alternative, but this idea kind of falls apart when you consider Alice in Chains were the first grunge band to get a gold record. They'd also been around for several years before finding success. Kurt claimed Alice in Chains started off as a glam band before adopting the grunge sound, making them sellouts, but I don't agree with this at all. Some bands change their sound and image naturally as their taste shifts. One great example of this is Pantera. Fortunately, by the end of Kurt's life, he had much more respect for Alice in Chains and was friendly with the band. Maybe a bit too friendly, though.
Freaking out. What was it like there?
I don't remember.
Because I once heard
Shot coke with Alice in Chains all night. I don't remember.
As for Stone Temple Pilots, there's really nothing that indicates Kurt hated them, but he did accuse them of ripping Nirvana off. This comes from an encounter between Kurt and Scott Weiland, actually being the first time they met. Kurt said something like, "People say you sound like Nirvana, so I think you owe me money for the songs," and Scott handed him a beat-up $1 bill. This wasn't serious at all. By all accounts, the interaction was very wholesome. But considering Kurt initially had a lot of animosity for his contemporaries, Stone Temple Pilots were likely no different. Though he didn't say anything about the band publicly, his opinion of them was likely the same as Pearl Jam, a corporate band that tried to capitalize on grunge. This is purely speculatory. Kurt might have been a huge fan, but I strongly doubt it. So there you have it. Some of the bands Kurt had issues with, I understand, but some were a little ridiculous to me. He did backtrack on his negative feelings about Pearl Jam toward the end of his life, which is good, but if anything, researching for this video showed me that Kurt could be kind of close-minded with music. If he had the chance to grow as a person, get clean, and settle into his fame, that likely would have changed, and it's a real shame that was never able to happen. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all later. Take care.